Yes, the government is shut down. We'll continue our coverage of that story, but also some other really important things are going on. And Brent Sadler is joining us, of course, from the Heritage Foundation, foreign policy expert, Middle East expert as well. And Brent, I got to ask you, we covered this extensively yesterday here on the program. Donald Trump is trying to find a solution to the ongoing war between Hamas and Israel. He has come up with a 20-point plan to try to get Hamas to agree to. Israel has already agreed to the plan. Even Qatar and Egypt and Jordan have agreed to the plan. And I'm reading in the headlines this morning that Hamas doesn't necessarily seem impressed.
Yeah, no, the plan is 20 points, 21 points, depending on how you count it. Complex. The Middle East has a habit of destroying even the most commonsensical and welcome plans and initiatives, but there is reason to be optimistic on this. It's kind of interesting to point out that if Hamas does stay on the sidelines or resist the deal, it doesn't necessarily mean that this plan can't go forward nonetheless, and that's an important thing. You heard President Trump also say earlier in the week with President Netanyahu that if Hamas is resistance, he's got the full backing to completely destroy what's left of Hamas. And again, the goal is, I think, from all sides, certainly it's in Americans' best interest, that there is no future role for Hamas in the Middle East.
Well, Brent, let me ask, so if Hamas doesn't agree, even though Qatar is really working on them to take a serious look at this, what is Hamas's problem? If everybody else agrees to this, they're of the understanding that ultimately this deal means their exit from Gaza.
That's right. I mean, for Hamas and their exit from Gaza is basically their death, their doom. They cease to exist, and they're open to future attacks from their enemies. They have lots of enemies. It's not just the Israelis that they worry about. But the interest of Hamas has never been about the improvement or the betterment of the Palestinian people, or even the eventual establishment of a Palestinian state. It's about themselves. So any deal that has them dealt out is the same as a death wish for them. So from their perspective, why not continue resisting in the very small hope that somehow rescued and the West relents and you get a lifeline to live another day.
Brent Sadler joining us from the Heritage Foundation. Brent, were you surprised at the level of enthusiasm for Donald Trump's plan? I mean, you have all the European, or at least most of the European leaders very excited about this. Trump has their approval. And again, we've already mentioned Egypt, Jordan, and Qatar and so forth. Were you surprised at how there are so many different leaders that were excited about what Trump has now proposed?
Not really. I mean, many of the European leaders, I think, just want the problem to go away because they've got protests on their streets from pro-Hamas groups and their own, Middle Eastern immigrant population that's very agitated about this whole situation since October 7th. So they would rather just go away, which is why you saw countries like the UK giving, statehood to an undescribed Palestinian state. Who are they going to recognize? Sure. It's political posturing. So if President Trump is able to show, and he's demonstrating leadership, but able to show progress on this, it actually makes their lives better at home. It really has nothing, again, to do with the Palestinians or the Palestinian cause for their own independent country. It has everything to do about domestic politics.
It's almost like Trump is saying, you know what, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. And if Hamas chooses the hard way, then talk a little bit about what Benjamin Netanyahu can do if Hamas, and by the way, President Trump, and I'm sure you know this, but folks, Trump has actually given them now a deadline for an official response. Now, if Hamas officially says, nope, we're not going to go for this, what is left for Benjamin Netanyahu to do? The world has already been screaming genocide. Now, I just so you know where I stand on that whole thing, it is Hamas that is causing the genocide because they won't release the hostages. But talk about what it is that Benjamin Netanyahu can do.
Yeah, I mean, just to be clear, October 7th was a genocide by the Hamas against Israeli people.
Absolutely.
I mean, very demonstrably so. But yeah, to set out that hot button topic aside, so the IDF, the Israeli Armed Forces, are already in the midst of a final kind of offensive to go after one of the last of the holdouts, places where Hamas could be hiding inside Gaza. And so that offensive should continue unabated. By all indications, it is, despite this plan being presented. And that pressure needs to continue, because there's no indication, certainly if past his prologue, that Hamas is going to enter into any seriousness an agreement that basically is their own demise. So I think it's a safe assumption that they don't, and that the fighting continues, and that Hamas is physically eradicated. They may be like handfuls here or there that's always going to have to be dealt with. But what's key is that the Israelis, with reliable Middle Eastern partners and with the U.S. backing, start bringing back some form of responsible governance into the Gaza. And as that happens, the IDF can withdraw, basically execute the president's peace plan, but just absent Hamas.
So what are the people of Gaza saying? I mean, you have people that will say, well, they don't all support Hamas. You got other people that will say, well, they voted him in. And so I guess my question is, where does the population fall within this plan?
Yeah, it's hard to know for sure, because data is very suspect coming out of Gaza. But there's an old saying: you don't get the government you want, you get the government you deserve. And so the Palestinians, I think, understand that the government that they got since 2008 with Hamas, maybe not necessarily with all of their choosing, but it's the government they elected in. Now they've been suffering for years of mismanagement and cruelty under this regime. Hopefully they'll remember that and see a better path forward. But a brutalized population is not necessarily going to see the high road in the next path. So it's unclear. I think there's a very large percentage of the population there that, as brutalized as they are, do support Hamas. And it will take time to de-radicalize and to try to get to a better place for the Palestinian people. It includes their education, which has been radicalized for over a generation now. So the Israelis, the Middle Eastern country partners that go in there, enabled through the Abraham Accords, I think it's going to have to be a generational kind of endeavor to try to change the dynamic. And thankfully, it's a smaller population. It's a geographically constrained area. If they can succeed in Gaza, perhaps they can also show a path forward in the West Bank for a better future for the Palestinians there as well, without having to go through the Hamas ordeal.
For Iran, of course, we all know that President Trump has bombed their nuclear capabilities and so forth. And so how has Iran being damaged impacted Hamas?
Greatly. The regime in Tehran has been enabling through arms and financing and ideologically backing across the region for these terroristic regimes. Hezbollah to the north in Lebanon, decimated by the Israelis after this October 7th attacks. The Houthis still in there, but greatly reduced, but they only survived because Iran's still able to smuggle in arms. And Hamas is totally isolated, and they're also decimated. So Iran is not able to get back in there. Again, as long as that land bridge through Syria and Iraq can be severed, it's very unlikely that Iran's IRGC, the paramilitary organization, will be able to reestablish a presence in any meaningful way in these neighboring areas and even the Palestinian territories to eventually rebuild their terror network. So as long as they don't have the money, as long as they're politically isolated, as long as the world is trying to cut their smuggling routes of arms and munition and illicit finances across the world, I think the Iranians can be kept in a box, rightfully so, and hopefully that regime will turn inward and do better for their own people in the longer term. But it is a significant geostrategic change because of the successes of the Israelis in the battlefield, and I'd also add with the American attacks against the Iranian regime's nuclear enterprise. It completely undercuts their backstop of like a nuclear threat.
So if Trump and Netanyahu, if Hamas comes out and says nope, no deal, Netanyahu goes in. They still have about 40 hostages. Hamas still has about 40 hostages. Can Netanyahu go in and, as Trump said, quote unquote, do what you have to do? Then how ugly is that going to be? Because it feels like right now Netanyahu is, kind of sort of been not going full on in in Gaza because he's trying to, as best he can, avoid civilian casualties. So is he going to be able to go in and do this without massive casualties in Gaza?
Well, I mean, it's perhaps some of the most intense type of warfare that you can have. And it almost always devolves down into hand-to-hand, close-quarters combat. That's urban warfare. And Gaza is very densely populated in most of the areas. So it has been an intensive fight since the Israelis went in late 2023, and it will stay that way. But what the IDF is doing is an approach where it's in surges, of course, but largely to gradually tighten the noose and take ground little bit by little bit. So the intensity has been steady because this is going to be a long fight, and you need to maintain that military tempo. So there's only so fast that you're going to go, and even when you surge. So I think they continue at the pace they are. They just continue to tighten the noose until they've cleared all territories of Gaza, and then they'll move back as they've secured them and turn it over to responsible parties, ones that they can trust. And it's going to require a very intrusive kind of presence, but not one like an occupation in the midterm. The near term, it's going to be a full-on occupation until they find and they build up trusted, reliable partners, both Middle Eastern peacekeeper types in there as well as local Palestinians, because the population, back to your earlier question, Hamas is kind of like a mafia organization. They have networks and they have subsidiaries, and they have also rivals, and they have tribes that are also in there too that are kind of underneath the mosaic of that, who don't fit fully into Hamas, but they'll opportunistically work with them. So there's a lot of opportunity for the power dynamic to shift once it's shaken up, and that's what the Israelis are doing, and why sometimes you see in the news some groups fighting Hamas, Palestinians fighting Hamas for opportunistic, territory grabs, but you also see some groups lining up with the Israelis and supporting or welcoming them in.
It'll be interesting because, okay, so how do you reach the population in Gaza? You're talking about millions of people. Is it just as simple as feeding them and giving them medical care and the like, and trying to build trust? And then do you see this? And then that question, and then the last question is, okay, so then do you see this sort of resort style thing that President Trump and others have envisioned for that area?
Well, I think it's an all of the above thing. I mean, the fallacy of the 2000s and the elections was this assumption that just because they had an election, that miraculously the society was going to change to a very pacific, peaceful one, willing to live in a democratic process with peace with its neighbors, and that's not the reality. So it's going to have to require economic development. This is President Trump, because it is nice real estate. It is a nice location. There's potential there with the proper management and the right investment. So economic development clearly is a part of it. It was attempted in the past, but it was twisted by Hamas. This was like the agricultural thing, and a lot of Palestinians were going across the border to work in Israel up until October 7th of 2023. The second is education. The UN organizations there have been twisted and taken over by Hamas, and you had anti-Semitic and you had virulent type of education and like grade school level up in the Gaza Strip. And it's also in the West Bank also. It's not just limited to Gaza. So education, economic development, security, so policing, so that you don't have the mafiosa Hamas like resurrected to start to brutalize the Palestinians again. So there has to be also a policing or a security part. And this is, classic counter-insurrection kind of activities and rebuilding institutions. But this is where hopefully the partners in the Abraham Accords come in, like the UAE or Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, hopefully also, who are trusted by the Israelis and also trusted by the Palestinians to an extent to actually help in that physical security day to day, so that better kind of worldview can start to emerge in the Palestinian people. Because right now it's not there.
No. And Brent, we'll leave it there. But thank you very much. Brent Sadler from the Heritage Foundation talking about what is next for Israel and Hamas. We'll have to see what happens. As I said, we have President Trump has apparently given a deadline to Hamas, and word is from the Hamas camp that they are not impressed. We'll continue to follow that story as it continues to develop. Joan.
Hello.
So Yesterday was day 1 or day 2 of the National Guard in Memphis. I don't even know anymore.
Yeah,
it's a little confusing, is it not?
I have to tell you that National Guard troops aren't even there yet. It's the other agencies that have shown up. So you've got the ATF. What are the other agencies that are there? The FBI,
right?
The Marshals Service. They're all there right now, and they're actually performing stops. There was a story about U.S. Marshals pulling over a car that had run through a red light and arrested 2 guys with, tons of pot in their car. They both had loaded guns on them, and they shouldn't have, but they weren't eligible to have a gun. So they were arrested. So, they're doing things.
You got all these guys that have felonies and they shouldn't have firearms. And
correct.
Obviously, marijuana and guns also don't mix.
Yeah.
So, and I'd be willing to bet that they're probably, dealing drugs and that kind of a thing, but whatever.
Yeah.
So good. So then when the National Guard does get in there, then they'll be cracking some skulls. As I, said yesterday, something very satisfying about seeing bad guys having to deal with the ramifications and the consequences of their actions.
So you may not actually ever see them. I'm predicting this because what happened yesterday was that Pam Bondi deputized some National Guardsmen as U.S. Marshals. So
Yes.
It kind of puts them in a different category. You're not going to see, like in D.C., where they were out on the streets and patrolling. You're not going to see that. This is going to be a little more, not undercover, but they're going to be
subtle.
like a little more subtle. Thank you. That's a good word for it.
Make Memphis great again.
Make Memphis great again.
Make MMGA, which does not spell any kind of a word.
Nothing. Right.
Moving right along. State Senator Brent Sadler was in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee. I don't know if you saw this, but earlier this week, he was testifying about crime in Memphis. And he was, again, in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee.
Memphis, as you know, consistently ranks amongst America's most dangerous cities. Last year, Memphis reported 111,000 crimes, 19,000 arrests. And of those 19,000 arrests, a whopping 56% were dismissed.
That is insanity. So it sounds like the vast majority of crimes, and we all know this is a problem, but Brent Sadler is testifying now in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee, talking about how the vast majority of crimes, they are dismissed. And one of the things that we clearly, obviously know is that when you dismiss the crime, then more crime happens because the bad guys are emboldened because they know that they're not going to face any consequences. So we all know the issue with the DA out there in Shelby County, a guy who simply will not do his job, a guy by the name of Steve Mulroy. We have spoken to State Senator Brent Sadler about this guy before, and they say that he got a ton of money, wait for it, from George Soros, which, by the way, he does deny. But, he's got all the earmarks of a George Soros DA, letting bad guys go with no charges filed, et cetera.
And unless we do something, Memphis will hollow out its middle class, and all that will be left are the extremely poor who can't afford to leave and the extremely wealthy who can afford private security to stay. The root of this crisis, in my view, lies in part with our Soros-backed DA, Steve Mulroy. He was elected in 2022, and he started implementing policies like a proposed diversion program for felons caught in possession of a firearm. He also does not oppose parole for first-degree murderers who are in prison trying to get out. These type of policies undermine justice in Memphis. DA Mulroy also operates his very own Innocence Project inside his office that successfully moved Michael Samples, a twice-convicted murderer on death row, to life in prison. That sentence now makes him eligible for parole.
Yeah, now, Michael Samples has been labeled intellectually disabled. And so he was able to get off of death row thanks to the district attorney there in Shelby County. And now that that's happened, others are following suit. So this guy, Michael Samples, who killed 2 people, thanks to the soft on crime policies, might be let out on parole and walking the streets. So, yeah, he went through, and again, this is audio from Brent Sadler, the state senator for the fine region there of Shelby County. And he went through all of the things that he has tried to do to get laws passed that will get Memphis safer. But it's obviously clearly a struggle. They've had a lot of high-profile crimes in the last several years. You folks know that. And so they're always on the list of most dangerous cities, et cetera. And he's got a list of things that he's looking to do to enact tougher on-crime policies, including, by the way, entering in consent decrees that would require the Shelby County DA, Steve Mulroy, to do just that, to enforce the law, to charge criminals and keep the bad guys in jail and keep the bad guys on death row.
To maximize these efforts, I would encourage this Senate to swiftly confirm Mike Donovan as our U.S. Attorney for Western District of Tennessee, because his proven tough on crime leadership will help with prosecutions in Memphis and ensure that criminals have the consequences that are not getting under our state DA. Lastly, I would recommend the Department of Justice enter into consent decrees that will require the Shelby County District Attorney and our justice system to enforce tough on crime policies so that Memphians can maintain the right to live in their home, to travel about our city that they love, and enjoy their property. To make Memphis matter, Mr. Chairman, we have to make Memphis safe. But let's also make Memphis a model of how this Congress can turn around great American cities. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
There you go. Make Memphis great again. I mean, Memphis has it. When was the last time Memphis was great? I don't even know. Like, I've been here for 12 years, and it's been a crap show.
When Mike Conley, Mark Gasol, and Zach Randolph took them to, like, the second round of the playoffs. That was the last time.
Is that basketball?
Yeah, the Grizzlies.
Oh, whatever. You heard him, by the way, talk about Operation Viper. We've spoken about this before. Joan and I were actually just talking about that, where you've got both the state senator and Senator Marsha Blackburn, also Senator Haggerty, all of them have been on this show talking about how Operation Viper was deemed very successful with hundreds of arrests, 500 arrests or more, and more than 100 federal indictments. And that was not with the National Guard. That was a surge of other law enforcement agencies. So now with the National Guard active at some point, we should see that drive towards a safer Memphis to continue. So to bring us full circle, as Attorney General Pam Bondi noted on Twitter yesterday, on X yesterday, she had 9 arrests. I don't know, Joan, if you have a different number.
No, that's the number I have, 9.
9 arrests, 2 illegal firearm charges and taken off the streets.
That's the two guys I was telling you about that got pulled over by the marshals.
And the devil's lettuce in their car as well.
That's them.
219 officers, they say, were special deputized, and the Joint Operations Center is now up and running. By the way, with the amount of crime in Memphis, I'm just going to say this. I don't mean to be a Danny Downer. 9 arrests doesn't seem like all that much. Can I just be honest with the amount of crime that they have in Memphis? Spoke to Senator Bill Haggerty on this yesterday on this here program. This was Senator Bill Haggerty on this show yesterday talking about what is going on in Memphis and how the National Guard going in will help Memphis become safer.
We have a shot. I started this work back in November of last year with the mayor of Memphis, Paul Young. Those conversations led to the initial step of putting together a strike force. That strike force ended its work about 2.5 weeks ago. We've already nabbed about 500 of the worst criminals in Memphis. This was the quiet, stealth FBI maneuver, tripled the number of FBI, added more DEA officials there, and we have made a major first strike. President Trump saw the success of this, and it's now not just the National Guard. That's what gets the media. 16 federal agencies are involved, and even including the IRS, because these gangs that operate there have illicit revenue streams. We're going to charge these criminals federally. That means they're not going to the Shelby County Jail. They're going to Leavenworth. That's what we need, is to get these criminals out of our state. That's what's going to be underway starting again this week, a major effort. And Governor Lee and I have pledged to the people of Memphis that we will put in place the resources long-term to fill the gap. They've been consistently under-resourced when it comes to law enforcement. And rather than argue about, poor allocation of resources in the past, we're there to say we're going to help get this right going forward.
All right, so there you go. That was Senator Bill Haggerty. Now, Sam, you say you've got some audio. Joan, I have not listened to this. So let's play fun with audio. Sam's got something. Set this up.
Yeah, so Senator Josh Hawley is confronting an ex-Biden staffer. This is about the national position across the Democratic Party of what they want crime policies to look like.
Very much. I want to talk about some of these policies that have gotten to where we are today. Mr. Jackson, if I could just start with you. You were deputy director in the Biden White House for gun violence and a special assistant to the president. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
You're also affiliated with the Community Justice Action Fund. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm also a survivor of gun violence.
You were their executive director. When was that? The Community Justice Action Fund.
2021 to 2023.
And you're affiliated with them now?
Yes, as executive advisor.
Okay. The Community Justice Action Fund is. Do you disclose your donors?
Yes.
All of the donors are public?
Yes.
You're funded by the Tides Advocacy Group, among others?
They're a fiscal sponsor.
This is right.
They
That would be
handle
a donor.
our HR.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This is a George Soros funded group.
No.
He's one of the donors.
No.
He's a donor to the Tides Advocacy Group.
Yeah, that's our fiscal sponsor. So they handle our HR, our back office, our operations.
Great. Okay. Great. So in other words, I mean that's
we're one of 300 organizations.
right that they run. You are a subset
we
of
pay
them.
Pay them to be a fiscal
Well,
sponsor.
you are a subset of that organization, which he helps to fund, right? Okay. All right. Just wanted to get a level set here.
I like how, pause that real quick.
I want to ask you about some of the.
I like how, Joan, he is desperately trying to obfuscate
Yes.
the fact that George Soros is funding. There was a story out I think it was this morning or whenever it was, last couple of days, where, I mean, George Soros, they're tracking him down for funding of all of these NGOs that he mentioned, the Tides Foundation. Which
George and Alex.
George and Alex,
Yeah.
of course, we can't forget Alex.
And people are like, well, the Biden should be locked up. If you could stop the Soros family,
Yes.
you would stop countless senseless deaths due to these soft on crime policies that Hawley's about to lay into this guy about.
Oh, yeah. This is, I know this audio. Go ahead and play it now.
policies that you've advocated because they're exactly what we see implemented in these blue cities, like defunding
Yes.
the police.
No.
Indeed. Let
That's
me just
not- we
quote to you
advocate
from-
for
Wait, I
investing.
haven't asked a question yet. We'll get to. I've got a lot of questions. Believe me, and I'll give you time. So let's talk about this report that you issued when you were executive director, a policymaker's playbook. And I'll ask you to enter it into the record, Mr. Chairman.
Great.
Without objection.
Thank you. In this report, you advocate, and I quote now, defunding the police because the long-term goal is fundamentally to reimagine how the state serves its citizens in the project of public safety. You go on to say police departments traumatize residents through a destructive cycle of racist over-policing, and the answer is not to add any more money to police budgets. Talk to me about, why is it that denying policing to the most vulnerable communities is a solution? I know that's what the blue cities are doing, but why is that a good idea?
It's not.
Well, look, I in no way stand with defunding law enforcement. I mean,
That's what your report says.
Sheriff Mike Sheridan, who taught me how to drive when I was 16 years old.
Wait. Your report, when
And,
you were executive director,
and
said you wanted to defund the police. Do you renounce this report? Mr. Jackson, do you renounce the report that you authored as executive director? Here it is.
You're the second senator to bring up an op-ed or
This isn't an op-ed. This is your report, a policymaker's playbook to reduce gun violence without policing communities.
There you go.
Okay.
Community Justice Action Fund, copyright 2023, when you were executive director. Now you say you don't know anything about it. Now you say that you haven't heard of it, just like the Democrats who all of a sudden say, oh, we're all for the police. They've been advocating defunding them for years. Okay.
You can't deny that. You can't deny that. Now, in the 7 o'clock hour, we'll play the rest of that because is that the entire clip?
No, there's a little bit more where it gets
Where they start talking
somehow
about
even more ridiculous.
Okay, we talk about the Two-Spirit. Mm-hmm. Okay, we'll maybe I'll either play it for Brian Wilson because he's coming up at 7, or we'll play it at 7:35 because it is so incredibly funny, Joan, where Josh Hawley is like, wait a minute. So you wanted to fund the police, but you want to somehow, protect the Two-Spirit people?
Two-Spirit, yeah.
The Two-Spirit people.
In the lesbian and the trans community and all, it goes into this. It comes back to the intersectionality of oppression.
Two-Spirit is a contemporary term used by some indigenous North Americans to describe individuals who embody both masculine and feminine qualities, often fulfilling unique cultural roles within their communities. It's got to be hell to be a Two-Spirit. Wouldn't that be difficult? You've got all the worst traits of both, right? So If you, well, I don't want to get into the whole thing, but
On the one hand, you can't take accountability, and then on the other hand, you can't fold a fitted sheet.
I can fold a fitted sheet. You just roll it up into a ball.
Wow.
Is that
Right.
what you're supposed to do?
Yeah, that's our standard for it if you ask the X and Y chromosome people.